Katja, and I recently joined. I was more from Sweden, yeah. So I joined in Amsterdam right before summer, basically. So I work at the Foundational and Experimental Security Research Group here at the FU. And today I would like to talk about a fairly new interdisciplinary project that we are starting, diversity and threat analysis and risk assessment. So first, I'd like to start by basically illustrating what the problem is that the analysts now they have to face and what is challenging about doing this in companies. Next slide. All right. So imagine that you are a solution architect at a big automotive company, and you are tasked to design a remote software download for updating the ECU inside a truck. So basically what you need to do is you need to come up with a design for this new extended functionality, and you need to also think about the security. So the basic scenario here that you want to enable is that the driver downloads the mobile app from the App Store, and then it connects it to a Wi-Fi dongle in the truck. So the Wi-Fi dongle actually directly communicates to the ECUs. And then when the driver wants to change certain parameters on the ECU, they are able to do so via using this mobile app. So they request a software download from a back office. And those services that are provided on the service by the manufacturer can actually send this update by the air, so to speak, so over the internet. So the solution architect needs to think about security here. So one idea could be what can happen if there is a rogue mobile app that's downloaded and installed on the mobile phone. So there could be bad things that can happen if this is the case. Therefore, the designer can think, okay, probably we want to have these mobile apps signed by the manufacturer, so there's less chances of this mobile app being actually tampered with. So, but what else can happen here? These kind of questions are for teams of experts that analyze security during this threat analysis and risk assessment workshops, which is a systematic way of analyzing software assets with respect to an attacker model in order to find security threats and, of course, eventually mitigate those threats. But the problem is that one group of experts may come up with the idea that I showed before, and another group of experts can actually come up with a different set of security threats. For example, another group of experts might instead think that there could be a danger of a rogue update, not the rogue mobile app, but the actual software that is getting downloaded. And that can actually be also very bad because maybe this update will do something bad with the ECU and break some basic functionality, which could potentially even hurt human lives. So it's an important threat. And they might think that, okay, in order to mitigate this, we're going to have to route all the communication to the back office through a private network and then also monitor the traffic there. And the sad thing is that due to the fact that these security threats are created via brainstorming, the reproducibility of the results is low. So one possible explanation is that during threat analysis, discussions about risk and those decisions must be made in face of uncertainties, and therefore it leaves room for subjective judgments. For example, in this threat analysis, it's the same scenario, but a different graphics. It could be that the analysts make certain assumptions about the system. For example, an expert, let's say Alex, makes an assumption that the users of the system are not malicious and they're not trying to misuse the mobile app in a bad way. And so perhaps in 90% of the users, it's actually a reasonable assumption to make. They won't misuse the app. But is it worth the risk with respect to, on the other hand, putting a two-factor authentication in place? So for better or for worse, this subjective judgment, these assumptions that are made during analysis, they contribute to the final outcome of the risk assessment. And this, in fact, impacts the decisions about the security investments that are made in the future. Also, the technical quality of analysis outcomes themselves is essentially determined by expert judgment. So, for example, did we manage to cover all the possible security threats when we analyze the system? This is something that there is no automation that will give you a good answer for this. Therefore, evaluating whether one analysis report, which was, for example, produced by one employee or a group of employees, and if this analysis report is better than another one, is also based on expert judgment. But can this judgment be biased? And we're asking this question. And if they are biased, how are they biased? Similar to threat analysis, in safety analysis, where the potential causes of accidents instead are identified, are also performed in teamwork. And a recent study actually found evidence of groupthink, which is a phenomena where individual members of the group seek to kind of conform their opinion, so not really expressing their thoughts equally, because, for example, because of a senior member in the room, for instance. So this could potentially also lead to a poor safety assurance of products. And if we go to our world, so if we go to threat analysis, we said that Alex assumed something. So when it comes to this assumption that Alex made about the users of the mobile app, perhaps the expert was actually under the impression that this assumption will be tested again later on at some point. So somebody will verify whether this assumption is correct. And the other expert, which actually agreed with Alex, was maybe had doubts about this, but didn't really bring it up because Alex is a senior employee, and of course didn't want to put himself on the spot. So if the knowledge is not equally contributed during the discussion, what are the influencing factors in context of security risk analysis? So one possible thing is that gender could be a significant factor. A recent study has found some evidence of the risk homeostasis theory in the context of cybersecurity. So in a nutshell, this theory says that humans tend to maintain a balance between the perceived risk and the target risk by modifying their behavior. So to simplify, let's say users of antivirus software may actually behave in riskier ways because they believe that they're protected by the antivirus software. So it's interesting. This paper is really interesting, but the interesting thing is also that they found that gender was one of the significant variables for the impact of commercial antivirus use on security event awareness. However, the study didn't go deeper into this aspect. It didn't provide more detailed explanation. Also, the artifact of measure here was not really technically complex. It was basically, they were measuring whether or not the users were opening an email attachment or not. Now, the question is, does the perception of risk differ based on gender when it comes to more technical artifacts, such as finding or choosing the suitable security mitigation for a security threat? In the software design space, recently a study emerged with 80 practitioners, which found that actually female practitioners, individual, with combined intuition and rationality, designed significantly more novel software features compared to men. So this actually just confirms in the final discussion of Pietro's talk in the beginning this morning. This is actually confirming what was mentioned there, that also innovation could be different. But this study was conducted in the context, well, not in the context of security and in the context of individual participants. So it's not yet sure, it has to yet be investigated in the context of security threat analysis and in the context of teamwork. In fact, some scholars have already reached out to the scientific community and point to a diversity crisis in software development. And to remind you, this threat analysis and risk assessment, this is conducted as part of the secure software development lifecycle in organizations. So it's happening on a daily basis in companies. And this is when the experts meet and they scrutinize the design. And the outcome of this analysis are actual technical artifacts. They are very domain specific and they include important security decisions for the design of the system. And because the risk decisions must be made in face of uncertainties, there could be organizational issues that play a major role in choosing the final technical artifact. And so if we find that the diversity actually makes a difference in the final artifact, we must put in place measures to counterbalance such issues. So for instance, to make it a bit more practical, a category of experts may underestimate the ease with which a mitigation is actually implemented. And this actually contributes to the mitigation of a threat, because if we underestimate the cost that it takes to implement a mitigation, eventually it won't get implemented. And so the security risk will still be there. So one must actually change the technical process where the likelihood of implementing mitigations is discussed. Another example is that a category of experts may have a different level of risk tolerance, which I kind of mentioned earlier. So for example, an adoption of a new security mechanism can change the analyst's perception of risk and then therefore lead to more risk accepting behavior. So the technical process must be adjusted to have an explicitly spelling out of acceptable levels of risk by all experts. Another category of experts may be forming a consensus towards an authority figure, as I mentioned in this phenomena, which is called groupthink. So this, I believe, is not that easy to solve. However, in an attempt to try to avoid groupthink is investing in security training and building a security culture. In the safety science domain, studies have shown managerial over-reliance on routine technical inspections, and this was characterized as a common phenomena. And so similar to the safety science domain, assumptions that are used during threat analysis must be carefully verified. However, there is no formal process that exists nowadays to verify these assumptions. So to realize this project, we have formed a collaboration with the social sciences faculty. And particularly, we have 2 academy assistants that are going to start to work on this. And we plan to firstly identify the key factors of diversity in threat analysis through conducting pilot studies in the academic setting, but perhaps also with practitioners, with and without a gender training. This will generate scientific impact because there will be a unified experimental approach for diversity interventions and for measuring diversity. In the second, we plan to design a gender training for threat analysis and run controlled experiments validating both the technical efficiency of such trainings and also some non-technical concepts of how well it worked. This will generate, hopefully, societal impact because specifically our vision is that diversity awareness will actually lead to better security threat analysis and risk mitigation as the involved processes will be better understood and the counterbalancing measures can be put in place in organizations. So I see that hopefully I'm good with time, but I would like to end this this talk by calling out for any one of you who have listened to this short talk and found some of the themes that I underlined interesting or intriguing. So if you are indeed interested, there are many ways I believe we can also collaborate on this topic. For instance, in conducting literature surveys and reviews or replicating experiments. For example, an interesting follow-up could be observing if there's any gender differences in risk perception when it comes to a general population, or also when it comes to a more engineering population, which would be the follow-up of the study that I mentioned by Eric Jardine. And finally, also designing and performing case studies. For example, I think they could be very interesting to observe if there are any traces of groupthink phenomena when it comes to threat analysis in the automotive or any other transportation domain as well. I hope you liked the talk, and please contact me if you feel that you're interested. And of course, if you have questions, yeah, I'm here to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Katja. And
yeah,
the floor is open for questions.
So maybe I have a question. So,
yeah, Victor.
Thanks for the very interesting talk, and I'm sure we can talk about this more later on. But I was just do you actually produce code, right? So if people actually producing computer code,
in the analysis,
or code-driven methods to identify these gender biases, to identify what kind of differences there might be at a very basic level. That's something that you would also include in these methods?
So I'm not sure if, are you talking about, so basically the empirical experiments that we would do in order to, yeah, of course. So if when you're working with practitioners or with with participants, it's usually difficult, but you can of course have certain metrics in place that kind of act as proxy measures for something that you're measuring. And then when it comes to code, for sure, when you have collected the data, you can use, of course, programming to better analyze the code. So you typically use R or any other programming language to analyze the data, to statistically analyze the data. But the point is that when you work with participants, you will get yeah. So collecting the data is the challenging part, I would say. Sorry, I don't think I hear you, Hans. I think you're muted.
May I ask a question? I have no knowledge whatsoever of cybersecurity, but what you seem to describe is, what you might call a filter bubble, or in police work, it's often called tunnel vision within a group of experts that do risk assessment.
Mm-hmm.
When talking about diversity, I was wondering, it seems to me that these experts typically are a kind of similar social group, well educated, technically oriented, white and male.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Well, coming from Sweden, I'm not sure, because with
awareness
the people
of, for example, gender bias or color bias or what have you will help. But is it? Don't you think that it in the end would be necessary to broaden the involvement in risk assessment to people that actually feel risks but are not experts? So, broaden the social base. If you talk about, you can talk about gender bias and be aware of it, but if more women that have these experiences are involved, then that will be more effective. And the same would be for people of color, immigrants, and you name them.
Yeah. I think that you bring up a very good point. The fact is, as you said, that yes, of course, you need to have a certain background, for example, in education, in order to work as a threat analyst specialist in companies. But I think that a first step is to understand where we are at the moment, because there hasn't been many people looking into that, for example, particularly in risk analysis. And I think that this could be a first step. My answer would be that the more impactful step as a second step would be to actually invest in education of this field as well, and try to broaden the target population for educating these kind of topics. And actually, this is also that the field that I got from the industry was that there is really a lack of security experts, and they really need them. So it could be that there is actually a gap that we're not filling, and that would be a very good thing, I think, in the long term.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
We will now have a break until